Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we sift through the complex stories and interesting sources behind things you might think you know and give you the core insights.
Making it efficient so you're informed without drowning in detail.
Exactly. And today, we're diving headfirst into the making of Prison Break. It's a show many people remember, obviously a huge hit.
Oh, massive, global phenomenon.
Right, but the story behind the show, it's full of surprises, initial rejections, crazy on-set realities, plot twists, driven by things totally outside the script.
Yeah, it really shows how unpredictable making a hit TV show can be, even one with a seemingly straightforward premise.
So let's get into it. There are some genuinely fascinating stories beneath the surface here. Okay, so starting right at the beginning. It's kind of wild to think about now, but Fox actually passed on Prison Break initially.
Yeah, back in 2003, they just couldn't see it working long term.
The big question for them was...
Longevity, right.
Exactly. They were like, okay, great, they break out of prison, but then what's season 2, season 3?
A fair question at the time, maybe. Well, it shows how network thinking worked then. But things changed fast.
Because of shows like Lost and 24.
Precisely. Those serialized dramas proved audiences would stick around for a long, complex story with high stakes. Suddenly, Fox's perspective shifted.
So by 2004, the climate was different.
Totally. Prison Break went from risky to, hey, maybe this could actually work. Greenlit. It shows how much timing matters in TV.
And once it got going, the commitment to certain elements was intense. Like Michael Scofield's tattoos.
Oh, the tattoos. Iconic. But the process.
Yeah. These were temporary decals, obviously, but getting them on took, what, like almost 5 hours?
4.5 to 5 hours, yeah. For the full upper body and sleeves, every time they needed them for filming.
Can you imagine? Wentworth Miller must have had the earliest call times on set.
Reportedly, yeah, sometimes before dawn. It really speaks to the dedication behind such a core visual element. It wasn't just makeup, it was a huge logistical thing.
Definitely makes you appreciate seeing them on screen a bit more, knowing that.
Right. And the show's path wasn't just challenged at the start. Planned storylines got completely derailed sometimes.
You mean like with Dr. Sara Tancredi?
Exactly. The original plan apparently was for her to die. End of season 2, maybe early season 3.
Why? What was going on?
Well, there were contract negotiation issues with Sarah Wayne Callies, and also her real-life pregnancy complicated things for production.
So the writers decided a definitive end.
Seemed like it. They went with the infamous head-in-a-box scene. Pretty grim. Meant to be final.
But the fans were not having it.
Not at all. Huge backlash. And apparently the writers kind of felt they'd made a mistake too, boxed themselves in.
So they just undid it.
Pretty much. Enter the retcon. Season 4 starts and oops, wasn't her head after all. She had escaped somehow.
It's a classic example of external pressures contracts, fan reaction just completely changing a major plot point. Undermines the stakes a bit, maybe.
You could argue that, yeah. When dead isn't really dead.
And speaking of plans changing, the whole scale of the show wasn't the original idea either, was it?
Not even close. Paul Scheuring, the creator, initially pitched it as something much tighter.
Like a mini-series.
Yeah, maybe 10, 13 episodes, focused entirely on the Fox River escape. A clear beginning, middle, end.
But then season 1 just exploded.
Exactly. Huge hit, especially internationally. So the network, understandably, wanted more. Lots more.
Which meant they had to expand the world. Dramatically.
Right. That's when the company conspiracy really ballooned. And they needed new settings, like the Sona prison in Panama.
So those later, really complex seasons weren't part of some grand design from day one.
Mostly a reaction to success. They had to figure out how to keep the story going because people loved it so much.
And that first season, the Fox River season, they filmed it in a real prison, right?
They did. Joliet Correctional Center in Illinois. It had closed down just a couple of years before, in 2002.
Wow, so they were using actual cell blocks, the yard, everything.
Yep. Gave it incredible authenticity. You can feel it watching season 1.
And wasn't there a story about Lincoln's cell having a notorious former occupant?
That's the legend. Reportedly, John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer, was housed on that same cell block, maybe even that specific cell area.
That adds a whole other layer of creepy realism.
For sure. Must have been challenging to film there, but the atmosphere it created... unbeatable.
With that kind of success, you'd expect spin-offs, but they didn't really take off, did they?
Fox tried. There was Prison Break, Cherry Hill, focus on a women's prison.
I remember they introduced a character in season 3 to set that up.
Yeah, Molly. But then the Writers Guild strike happened in 2007, 2008, and that basically killed the project. It got shelved.
Bad timing.
And there was another attempt too, wasn't there? Something for phones?
Right, Prison Break, Proof of Innocence, short mobile episodes.
Yeah, those just fizzled out, didn't really catch on. It proves that even a massive hit doesn't guarantee spin-off success.
Yeah.
That magic is hard to replicate. You know who definitely did catch on, though? Maybe more than initially planned.
Let me guess. Teabag.
Theodore Bagwell himself. He wasn't supposed to be a main character for the whole run.
Really? He's so iconic.
The original idea was for him to be a much more short-term villain inside Fox River. Probably wouldn't even survive the escape.
But Robert Knepper's performance.
Exactly. He was just magnetic, chilling, charismatic, unforgettable. The writers saw what they had. The audience reacted strongly.
So they couldn't kill him off.
They kept finding ways for him to slip away, to come back. He became absolutely central to the entire series, even the revival.
It's amazing how one actor's portrayal can completely reshape a show's narrative arc.
Yeah.
I mean, can you picture Prison Break without Teabag?
Honestly, no. He became indispensable.
And speaking of casting being crucial, the leads themselves, Miller and Purcell, were cast super late in the game.
Unbelievably late. Wentworth Miller as Michael Scofield, cast about a week before filming started on the pilot.
A week. That's cutting it incredibly close for your main star.
And Dominic Purcell as Lincoln, even later, like 3 days before cameras rolled.
No way. How did that even happen?
Apparently, once they had Miller, the casting director saw Purcell's headshot and just thought, yeah, he looks like he could be his brother. Boom, cast.
That's insane pressure.
Yeah.
Usually casting leads takes months.
It really highlights how frantic pre-production can be. Lucky they found the right guys, though. Their chemistry was key.
We talked about Sarah's fate changing. What about the overall ending? Was the ending we got the one Paul Schering always wanted?
Probably not quite. He's suggested his original vision might have been considerably darker.
Darker how?
More tragic for Michael, reflecting the true cost of everything he did, maybe facing permanent consequences like institutionalization or serious psychological damage.
Or maybe just a less heroic death.
Potentially, yeah. Something less redemptive. The ending we got, especially with the Final Break movie and the revival, offered more closure, maybe softened things a bit.
Possibly network influence, wanting something a bit more palatable.
Could be. Or just the evolution of the story over so many seasons. But it makes you wonder about that original, maybe bleaker ending. And sometimes things that become really significant weren't planned at all, like the origami swan.
Oh yeah, the swan, it pops up everywhere. Represents Michael's planning, his hope, his connection to Sarah.
But it wasn't initially conceived as this grand symbol.
No. How did it start?
More as just a character detail, something Michael, being meticulous, would do. A small plot device here and there.
And it just grew.
Organically, yeah. The writers saw its potential, the fans latched onto it, and it evolved into this really key piece of imagery for the show. Kind of cool how that happens. It shows how meaning can emerge unexpectedly in a long-running story.
Thinking about the show's structure again, the popularity really drove those later seasons, didn't it?
Absolutely. Season 1 was all about the Fox River escape. That was the core concept.
But because it was so popular, they needed more story.
Which led to Sona, the expanded conspiracy with the company. Things that arguably felt a bit more stretched than that tight initial premise.
Trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle, maybe?
Yeah, and keep the franchise going. It's a common challenge when a show unexpectedly blows up.
There was also that incident during the revival filming. Dominic Purcell got seriously injured on set.
He did, yeah. In Morocco, a heavy set piece, an iron bar, fell and hit him on the head. Really nasty injury. Broken nose, head wound.
Ouch. How did they handle that in the show?
They actually kind of wrote it in subtly. You can see Lincoln looking banged up in some scenes, the stitches, the bruising. They incorporated the real injuries into his look.
That's unusual. Usually they'd halt production or try to hide it.
It was a pretty unique way to deal with a major on-set accident, blending reality and fiction like that. And characters evolved in unexpected ways, too. Brad Bellick, the prison guard.
Started as just a total antagonist, right?
Right.
The main obstacle inside Fox River, besides Teabag. Pretty one-dimensional, maybe?
Initially, yeah. The corrupt, power-tripping guard. But over the seasons, his character deepened quite a bit.
He ended up siding with the brothers eventually.
Right? Forming alliances, showing different sides to his personality. And ultimately, he got a redemption arc.
With a heroic sacrifice in season 4.
Yeah, saving the others. That wasn't likely part of the original plan for Bellick. It shows how characters can grow beyond their initial conception based on where the story goes and, again, the actor's performance. Wade Williams brought a lot to that role.
Here's a really quirky detail. The theme music wasn't the same everywhere.
Isn't that weird? We all know that iconic theme by Ramin Djawadi, dun 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 dun,
Instantly recognizable.
but not if you were watching in France or Germany, apparently.
What did they use?
France used a French rap song called Palatin by Faflorage as their opening theme, and Germany used a song called Ich glaube an dich by Azad featuring Adel Tawi.
Wow. Completely different vibe. That's a very unusual localization choice for a major American show.
Very. Gives the show a totally different auditory identity in those big markets.
Going back to season 1's intensity,
Yeah,
the actual timeline within the show is incredibly short, isn't it?
it really is. All the events of season 1, Michael getting into Fox River, planning the escape, dealing with all the inmates and guards, and the actual breakout of the Fox River 8.
How long does that all take in the show's universe?
It happens over roughly 3 to 4 weeks.
Weeks? That's it.
Yeah. It feels like months watching it because so much happens, but the actual time frame is incredibly compressed, just highlights the insane pace of that first season. And related to that pace, the function of the tattoo itself kind of evolved, didn't it?
How so? It was the blueprint, right?
It started that way, yeah. Literally the map hidden in plain sight. But as season 1 went on, while still important, Michael relied less on constantly looking at specific parts of the tattoo,
It became more symbolic.
more symbolic of his genius plan, his meticulous nature. His success increasingly depended on his quick thinking, his intelligence, the alliances he formed, not just visually referencing the ink every 5 minutes.
Right. It was the mind behind the tattoo as much as the tattoo itself.
Exactly. It anchored the premise, but the character's resourcefulness took center stage.
After the show ended, Wentworth Miller's career path was interesting too. Not what you might expect.
You mean he didn't just jump into blockbuster movies?
Right. After being the face of such a massive global hit, you'd expect him to chase that big screen stardom immediately.
But he didn't really. He actually focused on screenwriting for a bit. He wrote the script for the film Stoker.
Under a pseudonym initially, I think.
Yeah. And then he returned to TV, but often in supporting roles, like Captain Cold and the Arrowverse shows.
It defied that typical trajectory for the lead of a hit show. Took his own path.
Definitely carved out an interesting and varied career post-prison break.
And the revival season, season 5. It was shorter than many people expected, wasn't it?
It was 9 episodes. There was speculation it might be 10 or even a full season order.
But they kept it tight.
Yeah, suggests they had a very specific, focused story they wanted to tell for that comeback. No padding. Finally, that Sona prison in season 3 seemed almost cartoonishly brutal, but it had real-life inspiration.
Oh yeah, where from?
Places like Carandiru Penitentiary in Brazil and other prisons, particularly in South America, known for extreme overcrowding, violence, and situations where inmates essentially run the place internally.
So the idea of the prisoners governing themselves, the guards only patrolling the perimeter, that wasn't pure fiction.
Not entirely. It drew from some chillingly real, albeit extreme, prison conditions around the world, makes that Sona storyline feel even more intense, knowing it's grounded, however loosely, in reality.
So when you really look under the hood of Prison Break, it's just fascinating.
It really is. The journey from that initial concept, that potential miniseries, to this global multi-season saga is incredible.
And all the bumps along the way, the rejection, the casting crunch, the fan reactions, changing storylines, the real-world challenges.
It shows that making any successful show, even one with a killer premise, is this messy, unpredictable process. It's not just about the script.
Absolutely. The original vision matters, of course, but so do the practical realities, the happy accidents, the actor who elevates a role, and importantly, how you, the audience, react.
That interplay shapes everything.
Which leaves us with a thought to ponder. How many other things we watch or read or listen to have these kinds of complex, unexpected backstories?
Probably most of them, if you dig deep enough. What seems polished and planned on the surface often comes from a much more chaotic place.
Makes you wonder what other deep dives might reveal about the stories we think we know so well. What unseen forces shape them? Definitely something to think about.